Hello, Lizzie here from Lizzie Curtis Designs, and I'm going to show you today how to make Declan. This is the pattern that you would download from my website. If you are one of my online members of my sewing group, you actually get this pattern for free. Otherwise it's $5.99 for the rest of 2023, and then it goes up to $7.99 in January. So I would suggest you get this pretty quickly if you fancy making it. And in actual fact, although I've done it as a Christmas design because it's that time of year, you could actually make it in blues and whites, those sort of frosty colours if you wish. Actually any colour you like. Anyway, it's a mat, although I'm going to show you other things that you can do with Declan, which is the gorgeous applique tree, and it's actually a little bit of trapunto in there. I'm going to show you a couple of ways of how to do the trapunto, which is really nice. There's lots of ways of doing it, and we each all have our favourites, but I'm going to show you two that I like to do, and then you can decide whether that's for you or not. So I'm just moving this around a little bit so you can see that it's covered in stipple quilting, in free motion embroidery, but in actual fact you can do cross-hatch design, you don't have to quilt it at all, but I think it kind of just lifts the whole thing. It's got a solid back to it, and that hasn't been quilted. We do the quilting just through the wadding only and then pop the back on. Because it's a small piece, we can do that, and then we bind it. But I'm going to show you how to make all the layers of the tree with the star and then the gorgeous baubles that I popped on there. I actually could not resist it. It needed something else, and those baubles just about make it. It really does. So if we have a look on the overhead, you can see that I've got the 5 different colours of green, and what I've used, I'll just tell you what I've used. It's the Moda Bella Solids, and these are the colours that I've used. I've used leaf, fern, fresh grass, evergreen and Kansas green. So if you wanted to use the same as me, which is the Bella Solids from Moda, then sorry, it's covered in bits, then these are the colours that I've used. Obviously you can please yourself what colours you use, but those are the ones that I decided that would work really well, and you've got that lovely graduated effect, and it's really puffy, it's really got tactile. You can see that it's got sort of dimension to it. It's lovely and puffy, and really nice. So you might not want to put a dinner plate on there, but you could put bowls of nibbles. You could just have it on your table beside you, just to have a cup of tea on with a mat. So it's actually, you know, very useful for all sorts of things, and just maybe that one thing that you want to bring out every year is kind of like an heirloom piece. Of course you could add extra things. You could add buttons and bells and all sorts of things if you wanted to make it pretty. I've done a whole lot of stitching in gold thread. You could use regular thread, you could use silver, it's up to you what colours you use. I've even done a little bit of trapunto on the baubles as well. Be careful when you do that because they can distort. I've got a little bit of a flat edge there, but you know what, you'd never notice. I've done the straight lines as well, so it looks like they're hanging down from the binding, which I think is gorgeous. So if I show you quickly, I said to you, you get all the pattern pieces, and I said to you there's other things you can do. Well, in the pattern you get ideas that I've computer generated. So you could do this as a cushion, so that could be on the cushion front there. You could do it as a table runner, where you've got a tree either end of your table or coffee table, or if you wanted to, you can make a really big sort of scalloped edge tablecloth and put your tree. You'd have to make 6, and that they aren't difficult, and they're not very labour intensive, so you could easily do the 6 there on a beautiful scallop table cover, and use a dinner plate to get your curves. That's the best idea I can give you there, but it just shows other things you can do with this design. So it's very versatile, and as I said, it's called Declan, and I think it just looks absolutely gorgeous, especially in that photo. Okay, so let's pop it to one side. I'm hoping I won't forget the steps of the pattern. If I do, I might refer to it, but let's get started. I'm going to pop it somewhere. I'm going to pop it there just for the time being. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is that we get the pattern pieces. If we go on the overhead, we can see, and I'm just going to take one of these pattern pieces out of here. Let's just pick up that center sheet. And you're going to draw on your Bonder web. So if I pick out 4, that's a nice quick one, and it's very, very easy to trace. So use a pencil or a biro, don't use a heat erasable, and you're just going to trace around your image, your branch, if you like, your layer. What would you call it? What would you call it? So just roughly do that. You're going to perhaps take much more time and care than me, but I just want to show you the technique I've used to create this effect with the stuffing. So there's our, just pop that pattern piece back, there's our piece traced out on our Bonder web. So we've actually traced on the paper side, the glue is underneath. Actually this is heat and bond, it's an ultra hold, but you don't need that, you just use your regular Bonder web or whatever make you prefer. So that's your shape. The next thing you're going to do is you're either going to cut or draw a second line inside of your original shape. So I haven't given you that drawing line, but because it only takes a moment for you to do yourself. So just go around. You want it to be, I would say, 1/8 of an inch is preferable, and as we go through the design you'll see why I think that, and you may want to change it to 1/4 of an inch, but it's a little bit too much. So you're going to make a secondary line like that, so if we look down on that you can see, and then what we're going to do is actually cut out just that outline. So this is all waste, so this is going to be the part where you're going to think, what's she talking about? So we only want a silhouette of the shape, okay? We want the main outside shape, and we could, if we wanted to, just cut all the excess away. It's just sometimes easier not to have so much paper in your hand. So let's just cut that away. And then what we're going to do is going to cut on the inside line. So your outside line is your actual shape. Your inside line is what you can cut away. So let's just make a little snip by folding over the heat and bond. And you're going to just quickly cut around. I'll be honest, it's probably easier going the other way, but let's stick with it. And this is a technique you could use all the time. So this is not anything particular to this design. It's not particular to me. It's just another method of being able to stuff applique shapes. And in actual fact, we're going to do a slightly different way in this video. The first piece I'm going to do as the pattern, so you're not confused, and all the other pieces, second, third, fourth, fifth, are all going to be a different way, which should be nice. The star is another way of doing it. Yeah, I'm not going to confuse you. I'll just stick to the plan of telling you one bit at a time. So we just cut around our shape. Okay, that's the last little bit. Right, so this little piece here is our waist. Okay, now although I've said it's waist, obviously you're going to use it for other things, so just pop it to one side, and you can use that on other projects. Maybe you're making applique things for Christmas. And then what you're going to do is get your fabric. So you can choose the graduated fabrics like I have, or you can use, I think pattern fabrics would look nice, as long as you've got some differential between the layers, and then you can see it better. So if we get our little mat, so the first thing we need to do is to make sure that our fabric crinkles are out, so we're not ironing it over a crinkle or a fold. So that's beautifully ironed now. We're going to lay our piece over the top, and then just start at one end and work your way across. There we are. And just gently put your iron over the across so it holds the so the glue melts and it holds it all down. There we go. That'll do nicely. Let's turn the iron off. Okay, So now that's bonded, we just need to cut it out. So for instance, this time we're going to cut out on the outside line. So where before we cut on the inside, this is your outside. So this needs to be neat. One of the reasons why we use Bond-A-Web or heat and bond is because we don't want the edges to fray. And this is a good way of making sure that your raw edge applique doesn't get really tatty. Because it could be that if this is used as a mat for food, it might get a little bit grubby. So you want to be able to pop it in the washing machine or at least hand wash it. So just take your time. And obviously if you've drawn this really well, follow your line. If you're like me and you've kind of sketched, then just make it your own design by just having artistic license. Okay. So that, and I'm just going to curve that end there. Not that it matters because it gets covered up by every layer, you'll see in a second. So that is our piece now cut out, and when we go to apply that on our background fabric, you'll see that we remove the paper as we normally would, and then we're just going to glue it down. But there is a little bit of a trick we're going to do with this video that's not included in the pattern, although I refer to it. So that's it, that's your piece done. So how easy was that? It's actually a really nice technique. So I'm going to pop that to one side because I've already cut all my bits out. So let's just bring the whole thing in. So there's my baubles ready to go. We'll talk about those when we get to them. I need one little piece of G700, which in actual fact is for the first technique, so I'll pop that to one side. This, you need 2 width of fabrics for your binding, so that's those. You need a background fabric or a backing fabric, but you need that twice because you need the front backing fabric and you need the rear backing fabric, so the one that's going to go on the back of your mat. Okay, so when you read the pattern it says 2 backing fabrics, you think, what? I don't understand that. Okay, so what I've done is I've found the centre of my mat, so I folded my fabric here and just finger pressed it through the centre, and then I've laid my tree right down the centre and as best as I can in the, on the crosshatch there, and I've got about the same gap here, top and bottom. Once we've quilted this, it'll actually be trimmed back, so you've got a little bit of leeway where you put things, but try and get it centrally. So what I've done is I've actually pinned each layer. So if I lift up this layer here, this is pinned, nothing is stuck down yet. So you can see the position of each of the branches, so you can see how they look, and try to get it so they cover the points there with the next layer. So it just covers, can you see, it just covers. So we're going to actually do one layer at a time, but because I've put my tree out, I like the way it looks. I'm very happy with the position. That one might want to move a fraction. There we are, that's me being pedantic now. And we're going to leave everything pinned on as it is, but obviously we need to stitch and stuff this first layer here. If I move it that way, you can see better. We want to stitch and stuff this layer here. So all you're going to do is, I'm just going to move that pin slightly. All I'm going to do is just lift this this second layer away. And although you think, oh my goodness, they're all pressed, they're all beautiful, and now she's scrunching them up, you know what, we're going to press this throughout the whole process. So now you can see I've got that piece free, if you like. I can stitch this and stuff this beautifully. So with the first technique, which is the technique that's shown in the pattern, we remove all of the backing of the heat and bond. So now obviously this is nice and cold, we can just lift this away. I'm going to keep it pinned because it's in exactly the position I want it to be in. Pull that all away. There we go. Just make sure it's still lined up, because it might just wriggle, which we don't want. Bring in our little ironing mat again. Just keep an eye on it. It's good for me on the overhead view, because I can see that really clearly. And I think I'm happy with it all sitting like that. And we're going to iron the whole thing down. With all the other layers, bar the star, I'm going to show you a different technique. Okay? So just be aware that this technique I'm showing you now is part of in the pattern. The others are going to be the alternative. And I think you'll find perhaps the alternative is easier for you. So I've got the glue on the back, you can just see it shining there if I just wriggle that a little bit. And I'm going to pop my iron over the top, and I'm going to bond that down onto my fabric. Check again, make sure it's still level and not quirky. And just, well, that's some water coming out my iron. Thank goodness it's only water, and it's clean water, so we're okay. So just make sure, I'm going to take that pin away, and do make sure you do a good job, because although we're going to stitch this, that's optional actually, you don't have to stitch this, but I think it really strengthens the seams, the edges. So there we go. So if you think about it, all we've done is attached about 1/8 of an inch all the way around there. And you'll think, well, how are we going to stuff it? Well, obviously that's what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to free motion around all of this fairly quickly. I'm going to just perhaps do one layer, we'll see how we go. In the original, which I'll bring up here, I've actually done a blanket stitch. Okay, so, and that's quite labor intensive, if you like, takes a little while, so I'm not going to do that for the video, but it is just a decorative stitch, so you can choose that on your machine and that'll look gorgeous. But for the purpose of the video, I'm just going to free motion around, and you could get away with using your regular foot if you wanted to. So let's move all our little bits and pieces out of the way and bring the sewing machine in. So I've got this set up for free motion. Let's bring it right in there so you can see. And on the side here you can see that the whole piece is stitched down. We can stitch it right across here if we want to. You've got to remember that's bonded down, so it should be okay. If you're going to do a fancy stitch, I would do the fancy stitch from this corner all the way around to that corner. But for that I would just do a straight stitch, because it's not going to be seen, it would be a waste. So let's just start a little way in. So I'm starting about 1/4 of an inch in maybe on the straight line of my tree, my branch, and then we're just going to just go around our branches. I don't know what else to call them. Just take your time. Now there's no stabiliser apart from the heat and bond underneath my piece. I didn't find it necessary, because the heat and bond web, whatever you're going to use, gives it some sort of stability. So I know if you're a little worried about free motion, maybe this is something you don't want to do, and just use perhaps a decorative stitch. You'll find some beautiful stitches on your machine. So just for speed, I'm just going to do, as I say, the free motion. And I'm sticking to my gold thread because it's beautiful. And you know, I need to change the needle on this machine. I think I've been saying that for a few days now. If you do pick up any glue on your needle from your heat and bond or your bonder web, a little bit of oil on a cloth, tiny little bit of machine oil on your cloth. Just run it up and down the needle when the machine is switched off, and that will remove any glue. Okay, so we've gone all the way around, and now I'm just going to zip across here. As I say, I don't think it's necessary, but we might as well. So again, I'm just free motioning, just mindful of my other branch getting in the way here. Great. We'll cut our threads. Okay, so if we bring it in on the overhead again, you'll be able to see that I free motioned all the way around. Well, that's great, isn't it? But now we've got to stuff it. So let's get ourselves some toy stuffing. Now, you really don't need a lot. You'd be surprised how little you need. And all you're going to do is flip this over, and you're just going to cut into the back. Now, really be careful with this, because you obviously don't want to cut your branch at all. So I'm being very careful. It doesn't really matter where your cut is. I mean, you could try and get it super neat and put it, you know, you can see the centre line there. Maybe you want to centralise it, but you know what? You're going to cover this up with a piece of soft iron-on interfacing, and you're not going to see it. So that's up to you. I know some people like everything to be absolutely perfect, which of course you do. Anyway, we've got some nice toy stuffing, some nice polyester. And I say nice, it's not very often you'll hear me say polyester is nice, but on this occasion it's really good for trapunto work because it remains lofty. You get that fluffiness, if you like. So all I'm doing is pushing the toy stuffing into the curves. Now I don't want you to be too bothered about the straight part, so I'll show you what I mean in a sec. So all we're doing is pushing that in. I'm using some hemostats, forceps, something like that. We've all got our different names of these things. And I'm just pushing that toy stuffing into the curves. And just, you know, work with it. You don't need a big gap, but you might want to make it a little bit bigger if you're struggling. Just pull some toy stuffing off. These hemostats lock, which is not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a little bit frustrating. So just keep turning your work so it's handy for you. And just keep pushing that in. And you really don't want a lot. I've got quite a bit in here and I'm thinking I might have to take some out. Now, do you see here, I'm pushing right into that little branch on the end there. There's something else I want to show you as well while we're doing it this way. So spread this stuffing out a little bit. There's no going back once you seal this up with your soft interfacing. So try and get it fairly evenly distributed. That's it. I'm a little bit happy with that now. Just to take that little bit out of there. And fluffing up the toy stuffing really helps because you've already loosened the fibres up. So if you want to move it about, you can. That's it. Oh, I think that's better. Let's just get that one done. And then move that down there. That's a little bit flat there, so I'm just going to poke that back in there. Good. Actually, I'm really happy with that. Now, the one thing you'll be able to see, and probably more so on the front, is that where you've got the bond web or heat and bond, whatever it is you've used, where you've got that going around, when you stuff this, it's only going to go up to the edge of your bonder web. Okay, so although you stitched perhaps right in the centre of your bonder web strip, I don't know if you can see that the stuffing literally comes up to the line of the heat and bond, Bondweb. I'm going to just call it Bondweb from now on. So that's why you only want about 1/8 of an inch, because it'll make it look a little bit strange if it's all attached, and it's quite precise. You can see it quite well. So yeah, I'm going to leave that because I wouldn't want to just put a little bit more toy stuffing here, but I'm just going to leave it. Okay, so now you've got to that stage and you've stuffed that first piece. I want you to seal this little cavity that you've made with a piece of G700, something nice and soft. And I need another piece, so I'm going to be really frugal and just cut that in half and try not to lose it, waft it off my desk. And then all you're going to do is place that over the top. Oh, this water keeps coming out of my iron. And just seal that down. I'm just going to hold it there for a second. So you just want a soft interfacing, nothing, you don't need a big piece, you only need a little piece just to seal it. And you'll see in the pattern that there's pieces going all the way up my tree on the back where I've used it to close the gap. So I'll just keep that there for a moment. The other thing to remember is, of course, that's done now. I'll leave that iron on. So the other thing to remember is not to press it too much, because you're going to be pressing the stuffing down. So I would leave it as minimal pressing at this stage as you can, and that way you'll maintain that lovely puffiness of your piece. Okay, so let's carry on. This time we're going to do a different technique. So let's just bring these down. So now we're going to do this second piece. Once I've done this piece and I've shown you, I'll carry on and do the rest. And then you can carry on with your stitching as well. So I'm just going to leave that like that, keep that attached. Make sure that your branch hasn't moved, that it's still exactly where you want it to be. And what we need to do now is to remove the Bondweb from the back of this one. Now this is the difference with this. I'm only going to remove the curvy part. So I'm going to lift this up. That's it. And I'm going to, that's better. And then I'm going to just remove the curves. So I'm not going to remove the flat bit. I'll keep some of it on, but if I turn that back, you'll see what that looks like. Okay, so I'm leaving that paper on. So now when I iron this down, it's only going to iron this part here. It's not going to iron that bit because we've still got the paper on that bit. So now what we'll have is a pocket, and you can stuff your little branch via the pocket. So you might find that a lot easier for you than the method I just showed you before, but that is a good way of doing trapunto. For instance, when we do the star is a standalone piece of applique, and we're using the technique that we did on the first one for the star because we can't do it any other way. But with this one, because each of the branches are being covered up by the previous one or the next one, then we can do it this way. So I'm just ironing this down. And don't forget, the Bondweb is there just to hold your piece. If you don't want to use Bondweb, maybe use little tiny pins. Applique pins are good, just to hold your branch in place. Okay, we've done that now. Take the pin out, and we're just going to free motion around the curves of our branch. Okay, so we're going to start just as we did before, about 1/4 inch in. Let's move it a little bit more. I haven't ironed that very well, but not to worry. So take your time. Now of course this is where you're going to use perhaps your decorative stitches again. Now don't forget, on this layer you're probably going to be stitching through some of your puffed piece. That's fine as long as your machine can handle it. It's not very thick. If you remember, we put quite a thin layer in, but it might take a bit more effort with the free motion. With your regular foot, be absolutely fine. I'm going slowly because I want to be as precise as I can with my stitches. Let's just get hold of that, that's it. And if you're never sure with free motion, do stop. No, don't keep going. Don't be afraid. You're in control. It doesn't like going over the puffy bit, but I'm telling it who's boss here. And then we should be fine. Just going round our curves. Well, I just haven't done a very good job of pressing this at all. Oh dear. Okay, so that's our second branch applied. Just pop the machine out of the way. So now what we've got is a pocket. Can you see? So this method of trapunto is achievable because we've got the layers, because the next layer is going to cover that pocket up, etc, etc, all the way up. This one's slightly different because we've only got a little bit up here that we could leave free, but we can still do that and be able to stuff because we're using our forceps or hemostats. But with these layers we can just leave a little pocket and just stuff from the top there, which is a lot easier perhaps. So there's no rules about these sort of things, and everybody's different as to how they like to do things. If it's a complete standalone piece of applique, then obviously you can't really do it this way. I'm going to say can't, of course you can, but you're going to end up with two lots of stitching which maybe you wouldn't be able to match up nicely, and we'll look at that when we get to the baubles in a little while, because I've got a little bit of a technique for that as well. So you can see from having a pocket it's actually a lot easier to stuff, plus you don't have the piece of stabiliser in the back of your work, which is not going to detract from your work at all. It's just an extra task that maybe you don't want to do. So there we are. So there is, I'll keep it on the side there, there is our little pocket there stuffed with toy stuffing. Please don't use a lot, you really don't need to use a lot. And then what we can do is take off the paper of the remaining Bondaweb piece there, and now we can iron this down. So bring the iron in again. Just be careful of all your other pieces. They've still got the paper on, but obviously you still want to be careful you don't put a crease in there. I'll just manoeuvre that down. Ooh, let's get the ironing mat. So just work your way along. And just iron that piece down. There we go. Try and keep it as flat as you can. It's not quite how I'd like it. It's a slightly different technique, but this might be a technique that really suits you. Let's put that down again. It's not sticking very well today. Don't know why. Just checking to make sure my iron is on. I think we've got it now. There, I'm happy with that now. So all of that layer now is all attached. So we could leave it like that, or if you want to, you can put an extra row of stitching in. That's up to you. But that's pretty stable there because we've used that Bondo web. So now what we're going to do is all the rest of the layers. So I'm just going to do exactly the same as I did before. Just peel off half of that, leave the curved edge at the top here with the paper on, and then I'll make a little pocket and stuff. And I'm just going to work my way up the tree. So I'm going to do that one, then I'll do that one, and I'll put the big piece on, and then I'll show you how to do the star. And the star is done in exactly the same way as we did on the first one, with cutting open and putting a little bit of stabilizer on the back just to seal that cut. But it's worth showing you. Okay, so I'm gonna go and do that, and then I'll come back to you when it's done. So I have done the whole tree, and now all we need to do is to pop the star on at the top. So I've done the pocket method on the rest of the strips that we had done before, and now we're going to do the star. Now the star, as you can see, has got the Bondo web going all the way around, so we're just going to peel the whole lot away this time, and we're going to do the same technique as we did on the first branch. And of course you can do that on your whole piece. That's no problem at all. But this one you do have to cut from behind. So place your star where you want it to be. So I want it so the point of the star goes up. There we go. And then I'm just going to iron that in place. Try and get your points so they're nice and neat. And you've got a little bit of stuffing there in that top part, but that should lay flat enough for you to put the iron over it. There we go. So just seal that Bondo web down, that heat and bond, whatever you're using, and then you can just go around your star. You can use your regular foot, you could use your free motion, it's entirely up to you. Obviously your regular foot is easier, so we'll change to the regular foot to do that, make it nice and neat, and then we'll cut into the back and stuff that little bit. So we'll just change the foot over. I have an adapter on my Juki. You may well just have a clip-on foot, but this is a high shank machine, so it has an adapter. Just as easy to use as any other foot. Right, get the screw out. There we go. And pop the screw back in. Sometimes I lower the presser foot, I find that much easier. Pop the screw in, lift the presser foot, get your regular foot on there. Be careful of your needle. And then when you've got it tight enough, you can just go in with your screwdriver, give it a little twist, and we're just ready now for straight stitch. So that's what we're going to do around the star. So let's get it into position. I'm still using my gold embroidery thread. Just want to make sure I get that tail out of the way. I don't particularly want to stitch that down. Let's get it, give it a cut. There we go. Now I have got it on a small stitch, so 2.2 is very good because the star is quite small. So small stitches really work with the points of the star. course you could use a lovely decorative stitch to go around your star. I always seem to do one more than I need to. Or one not enough, so I always have to have an extra one. Down to where I started, and then I always do a couple of stitches just to make sure that that little place holds. So there's our star. You can see what that looks like, stitched down, looks lovely. Let's get the machine out of the way. So now all we need to do is just stuff that a little bit, because we don't want that flat, because this is all lovely and puffy, you can see. And it does straighten out. Once you put the backing on, the wadding on, and you quilt it, it does actually go flat. So you mustn't be ever worried about that. So you can see all my workings here, all my threads. So just cut into your fabric just like you did before. Just make sure you only pick up the back. You don't want to pick up the star, and you'll pick up some of the previous branch. So, but don't worry about that, you can just cut into that. So just make sure that you've got a big enough little hole to put your wadding into, or your little polyfill that we're going to use. So just pop it into the hole. So if you're doing a regular applique like this star, where the whole thing is stitched down, then this is perhaps the method you would use to puff your star out, to make your design into a trapunto design, where it's has a texture to it, has a layer of puffiness about it. But you don't want it too puffy. Well, I suppose that's personal preference, isn't it? Got all sorts of rubbish coming up here, picked up off my desk. So just make sure you go into every single star. And the thing about this polyfill, and you will have to keep your eye on it, that it will come out. So as you're pushing here, for instance, into that part, you might be pulling it out of another, so you need to keep pushing it back in, telling it who's boss. And once you're happy with how you've got it, which I think is fine, just check the front. And doesn't that look different now with it puffy? And find your little piece of iron-on stabiliser. Get the mat back up again now, and just seal that. Now you don't want to put it over your background, so you want to keep within your star, because you might see it. And then we're just going to iron that in place. It's quite tricky when the star is puffy. You don't want to press it, because you don't want to take the puffiness out of your polyfill that you've used. And do trim your threads. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. That G700, it glues down really quite quickly, it's lovely. I'm just getting the front toe of the iron in there, and then you can tidy up these threads if you want to. There we go. You won't see these, well, you won't see my threads through my fabric, but if you have used a darker green or something like that, maybe you want to just make sure that your ends are trimmed. So there we are, so there's our tree actually done. So really that's the kind of main job. We've got the quilting to do and put the baubles on, but you've done the main task, which is to pop the tree on. And as I said, as time goes on, that'll all even out. If I show you the one that I made, you can see that it's lying very flat indeed. Not this is still all lovely and puffy, and so are the baubles, but the actual mat itself is. So don't be worried about that. Okay, so the next stage is to put your wadding on the back. So it's the usual procedure where we spray the wadding Now I'm going to put my baubles on afterwards, so they're sitting on top of my quilting. Okay, so let's just pop this over the top. And you want your wadding to be about a ½ inch bigger all the way around, centimetre. It doesn't need to be any more than that because this isn't a quilt, this is just a mat. It's not going to move that much. You still need to smooth it out. Make sure that every part of it is attached to the wadding if you can. And you can see just by smoothing it out we've already got lots of the wrinkles removed. Just check the back to make sure that that's sitting flat as well. Okay, so what that has done is covered up all of your little pieces of stabilizer if that's what you've used, and so that's covered that up. So now it's just a case of quilting. Now if we look on the overhead just for a moment, I want to show you that you could, if you wanted to, do a crosshatch, but you don't want to crosshatch the tree. So I would get a bigger ruler than this. This is a 14-inch ruler, so I would get your 24-inch ruler out. And you're going to go from side to side, so right across, move your ruler right across and measure your inches. Use your quilting foot if you want to. At the end of all of this, you're going to stitch around the outline of your tree just to make it stand up a bit more. So what you could do is come down here and move along your tree and then back up if you want to, or you can break your threads as neatly as you can and then start and stop over here. So you can do your crosshatch, but don't crosshatch over your tree because you want that to remain puffy. Also, if you do use these Bella solids, which is the Moda Bella solids, it doesn't take very well to a heat erasable pen. You could easily end up with ghost marks, so be aware of that. But as I say, you can crosshatch. I'm just going to free motion the whole lot. I'm going to stipple quilt, so I'll start off and then I'll finish it and I'll come back to you. So we'll just change the foot again. Okay, I'm ready for quilting now, for stipple quilting. I've got my beautiful gloves on. They are a bit mucky, I'm afraid, but they do the job. And I do use them when I'm doing a lot of stipple quilting because it moves the fabric beautifully. I haven't put my larger table on. This has got quite a big bed on it, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. I've got it set up for free motion again, so we're just going to get going. I'm going to start from the centre edge of the tree and then sort of work out. Be very mindful of your edges and make sure you don't catch them, you know, the edges of the fabric. You could actually pin this down to make sure that it stays quite a good rectangle. We're going to trim it down anyway, but just so it doesn't go too distorted, you could stitch around the outside, you know, get it really flat and make sure that it's beautifully neat and tidy. But we're just going to kind of go for it. So I'm going to start from right near the tree and then just work my way around. So I'll do a little bit and then I will come back to you when it's all done, basically. So we'll see how we go. So I'll do a little bit of stitching first, put my needle down and then just trim my thread off. This is not like regular quilting where you need to take the threads back and bury your threads, unless you really want to. With free motion it's a little bit more relaxed. so I have finished all the stipple quilting. You can see what it looks like now. And can you see how it flattens it all out? So don't ever be alarmed that by doing all this trapunto work, by putting all that lovely stuffing in, it's made it very 3D and it's made it a bit wrinkly. Actually, it does flatten it out with all the quilting. So don't ever be worried about that. Okay. So now we've got the main bulk of the work done, but I would like to add these baubles. So just as I did before, I'm going to position them on my work. So maybe like that, just kind of plonk them down. What I'm going to do is use this fabulous basting glue. It's by Roxanne. It's called Glue It, Baste It, temporary basting glue. So it is only temporary. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these down. So these are just circles that have been turned over and a running stitch pulling all the edges in, pressed really well with some best press or So Flat, and then I'm just going to use my glue just to adhere it down onto my work. But I am going to leave a gap of about ½ inch so I can put some stuffing in there to make those 3D as well. So I'm just going to pop that down. I'm going to put the opening just to the right here so I know where it is. So I'll pop that there, and I'm going to use my iron, so I'm going to plug that in just to set that glue. Now you could free motion around these, you could use your regular foot and just keep moving the foot as you go, which is not a bad idea. We could perhaps do that. The regular presser foot is far easier to go around when there's stuffing than a free motion foot. So again, I'm putting that opening just to the right hand side there, popping that down. And it just means that you can break off your stitching and stuff your circles. And could try and keep it on your machine if you can. It's not always easy to do that, but you can give it a go. So let's just put it there. So it's slightly, I think it is a little different to the one I did before, but that's okay. If you want them absolutely the same, then obviously you're going to measure them and make sure that they are perfect or a duplicate. So I'm just going to use my iron now just to set that glue. I mean, I must admit they look really lovely flat, but because we've got the puffy work here, it would be nice to do the same. Lovely. So just give that a moment to set. I think that's fine. It's not essential, but it just, if it's all set, then it helps everything keep in place. So I've got all the little openings. If I get my hemostats, got my openings just to the right of each piece, so I know exactly where the holes are, and I'm just going to pop a little bit of stuffing in there. I'm going to go all the way around and stop where that gap is and leave that hole, and then I'm going to pop my stuffing in there, and you need the smallest amount. So let's get that ready. A little bag of stuffing here. Well, that's far too much, but we've got it ready. Okay, so let's get our machine in. Okay, so I'm going to just free motion round. You can go as many times as you like around your piece. Okay, so I've just come to about ½ inch of where I've started here. So I've got a little gap here, so I'm going to put a little bit of stuffing in, just the smallest amount. I think even that is a bit too much. I'm just going to pop that in. So I've kept it in the machine. I've got my foot well away from the foot control so I don't accidentally start stitching. Has been known to happen. Pop that stuffing in as much as you think you need. I think that's enough. Don't need a huge amount. And then just finish stitching. So don't forget, this little piece isn't glued. Okay, so that's the first one done. Let's get a look at the other one. So don't forget, this is a basting glue, so it's not going to permanently stick that edge down. So you might perhaps want to put some bonder web around it if you want that edge permanently stuck, because it will ruckle a little bit. It won't frill, but you'll get a little bit of a ruckle there, which you may or may not like. So if you want that edge to be permanently stuck down, you need something like a bonder web, or the glue to go right up to the edge. So again, I'm just pushing that stuffing in a little bit at a time. Keep your foot away from the foot control on the floor if that's what you're using, just in case you don't want to break a needle. I think that's probably all I need. You don't need a huge amount. Just make sure that it's sitting nicely. And now this technique is much easier than cutting the back because we've got the wadding on. And now finish off closing that hole up. Not too bad, not too shabby, as they say. So we'll go around this one. And you know, with free motion, seriously, I mean, you can go around 2 or 3 times. If you don't like your stitching, it's actually better to do more stitching than less, because then it really does give that kind of sketchy look. But for speed, I'm just going to do the one. Just the one row, that is. So tiny little bit more, not much, tiniest amount. So I've got my foot again well away from the foot control. And now we'll just finish that gap off. Don't forget, that's not glued, so you want to make sure, in fact, wherever my stiletto is, here it is, that will help me keep that in the right place. Oops, she says, confident. That's better. Cut that. Okay. Wow. So there's our lovely baubles. And now what we want to do, just get the top of my glue so it doesn't dry out, is to do our straight lines up here so it looks like it's actually attached to my piece. So if you're not confident, get your ruler and draw a line. Try and line it up with your work. And then with this one, we kind of go, can you see the lines? So again, I'm just going to use free motion because that's what the foot is I've got on at this present moment in time. And I'm just going to go up and down there 2 or 3 times. Go right up to the edge, even though we're going to trim it. Okay, that's the first one. This one you're just going to go on that little piece there. This machine is making the most peculiar noises. I think it's going to have to get a service. And this one here. Sounds like the bobbin is slipping. It's not very often I use the UX8. I much prefer the semi-industrial machine. Anyway, there we are. Let's cut those threads. And now it's just a case of doing the binding, which is, you know, in comparison to everything else that we've done, is super easy. So I'm just using the warm of my iron to take away that pen mark, so we don't look at that. So the next stage is to trim that to size. So you need to take, there's my mat, you need to take about 1/4 inch off each side, but we're just squaring it up really. Let's get our rotary cutter and mat, and we're just squaring it up. So just work your way round. Now if you want to, you could use a 12.5 inch square ruler, so you get yourself a lovely 90-degree angle on all of your corners. But I'm just going by eye here, so I'm lining up my ruler against the fabric that I've cut. I'll just line that up on my mat now. We're not far off. So you want to end up with a piece that's 18 by 14 approximately. Don't worry too much if you're a little bit out. I'm just going to have a quick look at that first one I cut. Happy with that. I just need to bring that in a bit. There we go. So there is our mat now squared up beautifully. So it's just a case of doing our binding. So all we're going to do with the binding, and really good pictures in the pattern, is you've got two pieces width of fabric. So from selvage to selvage, you're going to lay them right sides together, just cross over a little bit there and pop a pin in, but you're popping a pin in just in that top corner there, and then with your ruler and your heat erasable or chalk pen, just draw yourself a line, and you're going to stitch across that line and trim to 1/4 inch. You're then going to fold this lengthways in half, and that's your binding almost ready to put onto your mat. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of that. I need to change my foot, change my thread. I'll be back to you shortly. Okay, so we're ready to put the binding on. I've pressed my binding, I've folded it in half lengthwise, and I've done my mitre corner, which I'll show you in a sec, on the overhead, how to start off. I have applied my backing, so I have sprayed my wadding with 505, and then I popped my backing on and trimmed to size. So that's all done. Okay, that's already, you can see my tree through there. So now we're going to put the binding on. We're going to put the binding on. So if you look at the overhead, that's how we start. So we have our mitered corner here, so you can see how that's done. I just fold the corner over, give it a press it in half again, and pop it onto my mat. You can either go from the front to the back or the back to the front, that's entirely up to you. But we're going to start just beyond the point here, and we're just going to carry on. We're going to do a mitered corner on all the corners, and then it's just a case of flipping over and hand stitching it finish. So 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're just going to start putting that on. So I'm just going to increase my stitch to 2.4. When you come to the folded part of your 45-degree angle there, your fold, I would pop your stiletto on there just to make sure it doesn't lift it. Let's just move things around my desk because it's moving stuff. Right, so I just get to 1/4 inch away from that corner, and I'm just going to go off at a 45-degree angle. Take it off the machine, fold. You'll have seen me do this lots of times. Fold your binding back, fold it back on itself. Make sure that's all lovely and straight, and then we just start stitching again. So I will continue all the way around my mat until it's done. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you just before I complete the end of that binding and show you how that's done. So I've gone all the way around. I'm ready now to do that little finishing part. So if we have a look on the overhead, I've got just a little bit too long binding, not much. So where that fold is, I just want to tuck my tail in there about 1/2 inch, I would say. So if I just trim that, and then this just tucks in inside. So if you can see what that looks like, and then this just gets tucked inside. Let's use, well no, I will use my pokey tool. And then you're just going to pop it inside like that. Now then, you could pop a little bit of fabric glue there just to hold that in place, and you can put it, and you'll see in the picture in the pattern I put it along this part underneath there so it attaches it. You could do the same on the front as well, but for stitching we can just pin it to hold it together, and then we can just continue our line until we've done that that last seam, and then we're ready for hand stitching. We're ready to flip it over and hand stitch. But as I say, you might want to either glue that little join together, or you might want to hand stitch. I'll leave that for you to decide what to do. Some people don't mind glue, some people would rather hand stitch, but so that's your personal preference. So just tuck that in. There we go. So that should hold the ends in place. So let's move the machine out of the way. Just give ourselves a bit of room here. So just get a few clips. I'll just show you briefly how to turn this. So all you're going to do is flip this over. Now I do recommend you giving this an iron. So you just iron along here on all of the sides. Look, you can see what will happen if you don't stitch or glue. That will pop out, so you've got to be careful of it. So just fold it back, and all of these corners can get pushed out. Let's do it the other side. Again, push them out, push them out. There we go. And if we flip it over, all you need to do that mitered corner is, I would certainly give this a press, is pop your clips in. And when you come to this corner here, you're just going to get your 45 degree, and then you're just going to fold it. That's not the best corner to choose because I've got a seam there. Let me just, it's what they call sod's law, isn't it? That you get a seam just where you want to show. Let's just do this one, sorry. So just to recap, to get that lovely mitered corner, fold your binding over. You can machine this if you want, if you feel brave enough. Bring this down so you've got a nice 45 degree here, and then fold that up and put a clip in. You want to make sure the front looks as good as the back, and then you're ready to stitch. So that's how you would finish it off, and then you're just going to hand stitch. But you can see what that looks like. See how that flips out? So you need to, as I say, you want to glue it or hand stitch, just to make sure that that stays in place. I'll just clip that down for the time being. There we go. And then you're just going to finish it off with a beautiful bit of hand stitching, and that is your Declan done. So there we are. We've made two now. I think they're fabulous, don't you? Perfect for the season. Again, you could use different coloured fabrics for different times of the year. You could add blossom in the spring, but it really is a fir tree, isn't it? Let's be honest. So there is Declan. I hope you love it, and I hope you make loads.